A file comes back. Somebody says it got declined, and the reflex kicks in. I set it down, ship it to another lender, or move on to the next prospect. But notice what just got skipped: the diagnosis. Nobody asked what actually failed. Today, we fix that with a repeatable method in the Post-AUS Deal Autopsy. And I'll be clear up front about what this is. It's a way to understand a file. It does not approve it, deny it, or guarantee anything. The underwriter and the lender remain the final authority. Before we run the method, three things have to stay separate, because collapsing them is exactly how a file gets misread. The published rules: Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA, DULPA, the FHA Total Scorecard, and USDA's GUS Return a Recommendation: approve, eligible, accept, refer, caution, or ineligible. VA runs through DU or LPA. That output is information, not a verdict. A separate layer: a human credit decision made by the lender. A decline is the lender's adverse action. It is not an AUS output, and it is not the same thing as agency ineligibility. Hold on to that separation, because the autopsy is really about figuring out which layer a barrier lives in. Start every post-AUS review with the actual recommendation and findings messages, not the word declined. The label tells you an outcome. The findings tell you why. Declined is a label somebody put on the file. It tells you an outcome, not a cause. So step one is to confirm the exact recommendation the AUS actually returned: approve, eligible, accept, refer, caution, or ineligible. Step two is to read the specific findings messages that drove it. Until you've done that, you don't have a diagnosis, you have a rumor. Before interpreting a recommendation, verify the data that produced it. The AUS reflects what was entered. A data or mapping error can produce a result the corrected file would not. The engine reflects what was entered: income, liabilities, assets, occupancy, property, product. If any of it was entered or mapped wrong, the recommendation you're staring at may not describe the real file. So before you interpret anything, verify the data. And to be precise about the boundary, verifying data means confirming it's accurate and complete, correcting a genuine error. It does not mean changing data to manufacture a result. The right next step depends on the failure layer: a lender overlay, a data or documentation defect, a structure issue, and a true guideline barrier each call for a different response. Identify the layer before choosing the route. Every post-AUS barrier lives in one or more layers: a data or entry or mapping defect, a documentation defect, a structure or program placement issue, a lender or investor overlay, or a true agency guideline or eligibility barrier. Step 4: is there a true agency guideline issue or not? Step 5: separate a lender overlay from agency eligibility. An overlay sits on top of agency minimums and behaves very differently from a genuine guideline barrier. Step 6: separate a documentation defect from a structural defect. A missing document is not the same problem as a file placed in the wrong structure or program. Each layer calls for a different response. Correction, escalation, restructuring, and replacement each fix a different thing. Choose the root before you've named the layer, and you may fix something that was never the problem. Only now, after the layer is identified, do you choose the root. Step 7: correction, escalation, restructuring, or replacement, selected from the layer you found. Here's the part that matters most: just move it is not a diagnosis, and it's not the default answer. Replacement is one route among several. It may be the right route when the barrier is a lender overlay another lender doesn't carry. It is the wrong route when the barrier is a data, documentation, structure, or true guideline issue that travels with the file. Moving a file without diagnosing it can simply reproduce the same result somewhere else. If you rerun the file without changing anything the engine evaluates, expect the same recommendation. A different result should be explainable by a documented change in data, structure, program, engine, or version, not assume. Step 8 closes the loop. Before you rerun anything, write down what actually changed. If nothing the engine evaluates changed, expect the same recommendation. A rerun is not a cure. And if a later run does come back different, that difference should be explainable by a documented change in the data, the structure, the program, the engine, or its version. A different result you can't explain isn't a win, it's an open question. A post-AUS deal autopsy is a diagnostic and triage method. It helps a licensed professional understand the file. It does not approve, deny, or guarantee any outcome, and the underwriter and lender remain the final authority. This is the guardrail on the whole method. The autopsy organizes evidence and points to a responsible next step. It never issues a decision, never predicts one, and never overturns one. Program fit, overlays, disclosures, and submission decisions stay with the licensed professional. The credit decision and any adverse actions stay with the lender. 8 steps: confirm the recommendation, Read the findings, verify the data, then identify the layer, guideline, overlay, documentation structure. Choose the root from the layer and document any change before you rerun. That's the difference between diagnosing a file and reacting to a label. Risk Sculptor is not a lender, underwriter, AUSLOSPOSCRM, pricing engine, or approval engine. The Post-AUS Deal Autopsy is a diagnostic and triage method only. It does not approve, deny, or guarantee any outcome. The licensed mortgage professional remains responsible for program fit, lender overlays, borrower communication, disclosures, and submission decisions, and the underwriter and lender remain the final authority. Risk Sculptor does not determine eligibility or make any credit decision without naming the borrower, the lender, or anyone involved. The last file you called dead, did you diagnose the failure layer or did you move it before you knew what actually failed?